Everyone, thanks for taking the time today. Welcome to the Power of the Microsoft Power Platform Lunch and Learning Series. This is the second session that we're doing here of a three-part series. And before we get started, I'll just kick it over to John Flagg, Director of Microsoft, for a brief little introduction.
Thanks, Jacob. I just wanted to take a second and also thank you for spending the time today. I think you're going to cover something really interesting, what Jacob is going to go through, and it's a little bit when I talk about low-code 3.0. right? And it's really this culmination of bringing together different aspects of the Power Platform into building an application. You're going to see that. You're going to see the ability to have an application. You're going to see a use case taking advantage of AI Builder and the Dataverse and the other aspects of it. And it's a really good example that goes through all aspects of what I call low-code 3.0, right? It's no longer just a bot or just an automation. It's all these things working together, and that's what you're going to get to see today. So I'm really excited. I just wanted to thank you again on behalf of Microsoft for spending some time learning more and with our great partner from sa.global. So Jacob, with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Get out of your way and let you work your magic.
Thanks, John. So like I said at the beginning, my name's Jake Roeder. I'm the CTO of the Americas at sa.global. And just a reminder for the people that were here last time and some new information that people who weren't here last time, I'm not a developer. I'm a functional consultant. I have a mechanical engineering degree. So I'm not I'm not some sort of like computer developer, someone who's familiar with coding or any of that kind of stuff. And I think one of the strong points of this session, hopefully today, will be able to show you how easy it is for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience doing development or customizations in various business applications to build something really useful in Power Apps and the Power Platform. So the first webinar that we did, which is recorded somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where, maybe Neetu can throw up a link in the chat. But what I did there was I went through a very basic workflow showing things that could be built using really just standard Microsoft M365 licensing and the Power Platform licensing that's included in that. So Power Automate, a SharePoint list, I think it was, or CSV file or something. But today we're going to show something a bit more complex. So the things that we're going to be using today do require some additional licensing, but I think what you will hopefully find at the end of the session is that the benefits are going to outweigh the incremental licensing costs. So a super quick agenda here is we don't have a lot of time in the agenda to talk through sort of what Power Platform is. Again, we did have a pretty good session about that a couple months ago. So if you want to look at the recording, you certainly can. Today, we're going to focus on doing the demonstration. So we're going to go into Power Platform and build an app, like John said, using Power Apps, AI Builder, Dataverse, and then Power Automate. We're going to test it, run through sort of the workflow and how it works, and then answer any questions that you may have. Again, if you want to ask questions, feel free to send them in the chat. We do have people monitoring the chat if there are things that pop up. And additionally, this session is going to be recorded. So if you have other people in your organization or you fall asleep during the middle of it or something, you can always come back to the recording and watch it again. So like I said, we're going to get right into it. When I was trying to come up with an idea for this session, I asked around my organization and we're trying to solicit ideas from other people and stuff. And one thing that came up, especially for us, we're pretty involved in the community aspect of Microsoft business applications and conferences and so on. And one of the things that came up was how painful it is to capture the information, contact information from people that you meet at conferences, get it tracked into a CRM system, and then do something with that information, right? You have to rent a scanner usually, and maybe it just sits at your booth. So if you're wandering around talking to people, it's harder to bring that information in. You have to make sure they come back to the booth. They're expensive, right? They usually cost a couple $1,000s or something like that. You have to get a couple of them. They don't work and you have to go to the IT support, just kind of a pain in the neck. So what we thought was maybe we could build something using Power Platform that was a bit more cost effective and hopefully a little bit useful too. So what we're going to do here is build a conference follow-up tool. So we're going to first create a Power App, a Canvas-based Power App that scans the information from a business card using AI Builder. We're then going to sort of update or massage the information that comes out of AI Builder if needed, send it into Dataverse for storage. And then we're going to take the information that's in Dataverse for those contacts. We're going to cycle through it at the end of the day and send out sort of a nice to meet you, or if you have any other questions, feel free to follow up email out to all the people that you scan throughout the day. So it's really a pretty, I think, powerful tool, and we'll see it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour to build, so it's not particularly complex. We're going to go really bare bones. We're not going to talk about the UI experience necessarily or branding it to match your company's color schemes or any of that kind of stuff. All that's available, of course, but what we're going to focus on here is functionality and really show you how quick something can get built. That can be really powerful for your business. So the things, like I said, that we're going to use in this demo are Power Apps to help with our low code, no code iPhone or Android phone building experience. We're then going to use Power Automate, and all the data is going to be stored in Dataverse. An AI builder is going to help us pull the information from the business card and store it in Dataverse. So like I said, real quick intro, real quick description of what's going to happen. We'll get right into the demo. Got too many monitors here, just bear with me for a second. Okay, so this is Power Apps, right? So we go to make.powerapps.com, and what we're going to get is sort of a landing page. And you can see that we have the ability to deploy applications based on these templates that are provided, things that are created, connected directly to Dataverse or SharePoint or SQL, for example, using some of the AI Builder add-ins. We'll get into that in a second. What we're going to do is start from a blank app and really start from nothing and show you how quick you can get going. So I'm going to hit blank app. When this pops up, it gives us the ability to do a model-driven app, which is a much more complex business application. In reality, some of the first-party applications like Dynamics 365 for sales, Dynamics 365 field service, product operations, those are really apps that are built on the Dataverse. And we're going to see Dataverse in a minute here. But Dataverse is a really powerful business applications database that has a bunch of preloaded entities and stuff in it with relationships to each other. So that's kind of very easy to create something out of the box without a lot of customizations. We could build an app, relying on sort of those more complex relationships. We're not going to necessarily do that here. We're going to build something that's focused on the user experience and getting something quickly added into the database. So we're going to use a Canvas app for that. You can also use Power Apps for what are called Power Pages. And again, they're basically a external facing web front end for applications that are built on top of Dataverse. So again, a lot of power in the Power Platform. We're going to use like the most basic, easiest thing in the world here, but there's really a lot of flexibility if you need to build something a lot more complex. So we're going to name this P4 Webinar 2. We have the ability to change our form factor here. I'm going to switch it to phone, and that's going to just change the way that the app looks. You can see here the tablet's going to make it more of a web browser-based app, and the phone's going to give us a form factor that fits a phone better. So we're going to use that because, again, the intention is to use a remote device for scanning these business cards. Going to hit the create button here. It's just going to take a second to deploy. Again, this is blank, right? So this is coming from nothing. We're just getting a blank screen here with really nothing attached to it. And we're going to build it from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a control for our AI builder. And you can see how simple this is, providing you have the licensing assigned. You go up to the insert button, expand AI builder, and you can see all the different types of things that we have here. We're going to use business card reader, but there's other things like receipt processor if you want to build an expense tracking app, form processor if you want to scan invoices or some other sort of structured documentation. There's an object detector if you want to be able to find individual or particular objects in an image. So there's really a lot of complexity and power in just these standard out of the box, single click and it works kind of things. So we're going to use business card reader. It's going to add a control into our layout here. And all we're going to do is once it gets deployed is we're going to position it and scale it and stuff so it fits in here better. You can see this is kind of it, right? The control itself has a little place that displays the image. There's a button for activating this tool so that it's going to give us the ability to either choose from a file or take a picture from the camera on the phone. And then what happens when this runs is it takes the file, it sends it through some sort of Azure service that evaluates it and pulls the information out into this business card reader object. So the next thing we're going to do is the data from here is going to end up in a form below that we're then going to submit into Dataverse. So I'm going to next come up to insert again and hit edit form. I'm going to reposition this as well. myself a little bit of space there. I'm gonna leave some room for a button on the bottom. It's a pretty aggressive button. Let's change that. Okay. And what we can see here is this form isn't connected to any data, right? So we can either hit connect here, or we can go directly over to the properties tab once we have this object selected. So one of the important things to understand about Power Apps and the designer here is which object you have selected obviously changes the properties form that's going to show, or the context of the properties form is going to display. And so if you want to select the entire app, for example, you can click off of these different objects and you get sort of the entire screen here. If you want to choose the properties in the business card reader, you can select it by clicking on the UI here, or additionally, there's this tree view over here that you can use to select too. So you might get in a situation where there's things that are nested or multiple layers of data or something. And in that case, you can come and just click on the different objects here and it will change the properties that you're going to change there as well. So we're going to, again, go to form 1, and we want to connect this to our Dataverse. So before we do this, I'm going to pop over into Dataverse actually. So again, back to make.powerapps.com. And what we're going to see here is under the Dataverse menu item here, there's a tables menu item. So again, like I mentioned before, Dataverse is really like a business applications database out of the box. It's hosted in the cloud, it's built in the Power Apps platform, and it's really, again, the foundation for all the different Dynamics 365 applications that are based off of customer engagement. So field service, sales, project operations. But you can extend it, and that's what we're going to do here. So first, I'm going to show you this is a default demo environment. I'm going to show you all the tables or entities or whatever you want to call them that are included. So you can see the kind of typical things, right? Like kind of count, which might represent a customer or a vendor or something like that. We've got information about addresses, appointments, which are linked to accounts. We have emails that you can track, different currencies, all different types of things are stored inside here. And these are just kind of the recommended tables. There's also a handful of system tables that are controlled here that AI Builder uses and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different data that's sort of available out of the box. You can also create custom tables. So if there's something else that you want to store here, you can certainly go ahead and do that. Create your own custom entity or custom table with all the different fields on it and data types and so on. What we're going to do again is we're going to use the contacts because we're going to be storing information from our business cards against a contact. And so I'm going to click on that. And this is sort of the experience that you get when you open up one of these entities or tables. And if you click in the schema section here on columns, you can actually see all the different columns that are available. So there's like 140 columns, I think, on the contact table by default. A lot of it obviously about addresses and different locations and so on and so forth. But things like, again, this is the contacts. So things like the company that it's associated with, the contact's birthday, their first name, last name, owning user. And again, a lot of these have different links to other tables too. So you can see here, like these are lookups, the different tables that are in Dataverse. So this whole complex relationship and structure is already built in here for you. Now, like I said before, you can actually extend things too. So in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to track this customer information or this contact information on a contact record. But we want to add a couple of additional fields too to make sure that we can both indicate that one, it needs to have its, we need to send it an email from the conference, and then two, that we did send it an email from the conference. So we're going to just add two simple fields here to track that information. I'm going to hit the new column button up on top. We're going to call this email needed. We're going to pick a data type of lookup, nope, choice, yes and no. So it's just a simple Boolean here. And we're going to set no by default. So what you're seeing is we're also not going to make this required in the database. So what that means is we could theoretically create a record directly in Dataverse here without this field set specified. We're going to actually put a form control on though, and some business logic on the form, and say that it has to be specified before you submit a record. So we are going to make it required, but just not technically in the database. We're going to hit save here. This will take a second to save this. And then we're going to add another field again for emails sent. So basically what's going to happen is when we create the record, we're going to flip that flag of email required or email needed to yes, and we're going to leave the email sent to no. So what's going to happen is we're going to have in our database records that have this email required checked, but not email sent. We're going to use our Power Automate to scroll through those, select those records, send an email to them, and then slip the flag over to email sent to indicate that it's actually been contacted. So another new column here, email sent. Data type of choice, yes, no. Default choice of no. We're going to save this, and again, this is going to take a second. And I'm doing this now because when we go over to the Power App, we're going to have to reference those two custom fields that we just created. So if we search in here, we should be able to find those two fields that we just added. Search for email. And we can say here's our email needed and email sent. We're going to see a name field here. So this is a system name for these two fields. We'll get back to this in a second, but just be aware that they are stored out here in the Dataverse tables list. Okay, so back to our app for a second. We're going to, again, I'm just going to start this over. Click on the form. We're going to click on data source. We're going to connect to contacts from the Dataverse. Now, I've already built this connector by coming and selecting a connector down here. Shoot. If you want to connect to some other place, you certainly could. You can see all the different types of connectors that are available. These are just the favorites, but there's a bunch of other ones under See All connectors. And these are the same connectors basically that Power Automate has access to. So there's a lot of similarities here in Power Automate and Power Apps connectors. But in our case, we're just going to connect to Dataverse. So it throws in these two fields by default. We're going to specify some additional fields. So what we want to see here is we want a first name and last name, because the full name is really just a display method that gets calculated. So first name, check. Last name, check. We also want our email needed field. And I think that should be good. So a couple of things here. We're going to add obviously we're going to add our specific values or fields that we want here. In addition, we want to make some of these required. So we're going to make the email field required because we are going to send an email. So we want to make sure there's an email field being populated. To do so, we select our field. And again, if you can't get it here, it's kind of weird where you click and stuff. So another way to do it would be to come over here and pick the data card directly from the tree view. But once we have that selected, we can go to the advanced tab of our properties, hit unlock to change properties, and then come and specify true here instead of false. So we'll just type in true. Click off of that. And now we have our little asterisk indicating that the email address is required. We've got business phone, first name, last name, and email needed. Okay, so we're going to hide the email needed field. So we're going to do the same thing. Click on email needed data card, properties. You can see there's a visible property here. We're going to hit off because we don't need to see it. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to default in this value whenever this record is created. So we're going to go to the advanced tab. We're going to unlock this and we're going to default this. Now you'll see here the syntax is sort of like a dot notation kind of thing going on. It looks cumbersome and looks kind of complex. Once you get used to it, it's really pretty straightforward. And one of the nice things about Power Platform is it's so pervasive as far as the different places and different organizations that use it. It really has a huge community. So there's a ton of information on the doc sites, right? Like learn.microsoft.com or docs.microsoft.com. And there's also just a ton of community blogs and forums and stuff that are really well attended and well used. And so if you ever have any questions, you can certainly reach out to the community and get updates or get information from them, or look for other people that may have had the same questions as you. So Power Platform is really powerful and it has a really strong community around it. right, so we're going to default this as email needed, and we're going to pick our value of yes. So this is going to by default show yes. Again, it's hidden, so we can't see it here. And then the next thing we want to do is let's try to get rid of some of this stuff here. So we're going to give ourselves a little bit more space. My favorite part, moving boxes around. So we'll do that here. Get rid of that scroll bar because it was driving me nuts. And I'm going to create a button on the bottom here. Okay, so button. I'm going to drag him to the bottom. Make sure it fits. You can see there's some kind of nice, snapping and so on and so forth. If you want to change your radiuses to this, you can. You can see they're all controlled here. So if you want to make this a square so it fits better, the properties are pretty self-explanatory. It's very Visual Basic feeling. Whoops, I deleted it. So if you're familiar with Visual Basic or something like that, they're very similar types of syntax and properties and so on and so forth. All right, so now we got a nice square button on the bottom. All right, so a couple of other things. We want to take the output from the business card reader and plug it into these fields by default so we don't have to type it in, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and set the default like we did for that checkbox or the dropdown, and we're going to set them for all these different fields. So first, we're going to start with email. We're going to go to default, and we're going to refer to the business card reader by its name, which is business card reader 1, and then take the email address from there. Done. Next, business phone. So we're going to unlock the properties. We're going to go to default. We're going to say business card reader 1 dot phone. I think in this case, we're going to grab mobile because most people have mobile phones and not business phones listed anymore. First name. Do the same thing here. Unlock the change properties. Default. Business card reader 1 dot first. And in the Learn article for this, or docs, or I don't remember exactly which page it's on anymore, but one of the articles for the business card reader, it gives you all the different properties that are available and all the different outputs of the object that are created once the business card reader runs. So if you want to find that list, you certainly can do that. You can also just use the dot and sort of the autocomplete and scroll through it to find the different values that you want to. So if we change this now to business card reader 1 dot last name. Great. Awesome. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is we're going to take the information once we run it through the business card reader, and we're going to use this button to submit it. So we're going to hit button. I'm actually going to change the text here too. And so just double clicking on it, you can also change it in here in the text of the property, but I'm just going to double click and say schedule email, or how about save and schedule email. So you know what we're doing here. And then one of the different things is there's some properties obviously that are specific to the objects that you're clicking on, but there's also methods. And so by clicking on these up in the formula bar, you can change the different methods that you want and sort of what they do. So this on select right now isn't doing anything, but we're going to say submit form. And we want to refer to our form that we're submitting, so form 1, and close it. When I click off this, you can actually see that there's a little icon here that's telling you there's an issue. So it says name isn't valid, form 112. Oh, I made a typo here and screwed up. So what you can do is you can click on this. It'll actually take you up to the formula bar for this particular method too, where you can change it. So I'm going to do okay, I'm clicking off, that should be good. Now there's one, excuse me, there's one little kind of idiosyncrasy here. When you have a form, you have to actually instantiate it or initialize it to start with. And so what we're going to do is when you open up this page and load the Power App, we are going to, so on visible, when the page loads, we're going to do a form reset. I'm sorry, reset form 1. And we're going to do another command. So we just separate that with the semicolon, and we're going to say new form. Form 1. So that should create us a new record here ready to be submitted. Okay, so now that we made our changes, there's actually a real-time preview in here too. So we're just going to save this first. Should just take a second. Okay, it's saved. And we'll hit the preview the app button. And what we got here is just this is what our app will look like on our phone, basically. And so we hit the scan business card button with our finger. It's going to give us a file chooser or the ability to use a phone. So I'm just going to pick a business card I already have saved on my computer, sends it out to AI Builder, does its little scanning thing, tries to find the name and information. And then it's supposed to save it here, but it's not. So let's try this again. We're going to close this guy. Let's do a publish. I'm actually going to open it up on my phone too. So what this publish does is there's a save that saves the work that we're working on, but it actually doesn't make it out to the general public yet for your organization. So what you have to do in order to do that is you have to publish the app using the publish button, which has sort of a change control on it and gives you the ability to put notes on there and stuff. And actually it is a different version of the app. So when you go and look at it in your Power Apps application on your phone, it's going to ask you to download or get the newest version of the app when you open it, because it does see that there's an old version or a new version out there. So Power Apps, the app itself, is kind of a strange idea. It's a app in an app. So the idea is you download the Power Apps app from iTunes, App Store. You download it from the App Store, the Android store, and once you install it on your phone, it's just kind of it's like a app in a box sort of thing. You have all of your different apps that your organization has shared with you and you have access to stored inside the Power app. So you don't have individual icons on your phone for the 50 apps that your organization might have. You have a single Power App icon. You open it up, and then you see your apps inside there. So what I'm doing right now is just loading it on here after publishing it. It's going to take a second. Just check to make sure that it's not working on my phone as well. Sometimes this save and the publish, I've noticed a little bit of clunkiness, I guess, is a way to say it. Let's see here. Okay, so it seemed to work there. Let's try it one more time. I'm just going to refresh this. The very exciting webinar of Watch Jake Wait. Okay, so we're going to preview this one more time. Scan business card. Oh, we have our record here. So once it scans, it should fill in the information that we're looking for. Perfect. So this is pulling all the information out of the business card reader object and putting it in here by default. So what we want to do is, I mean, as you can see in this form, we do have the ability to change things. So I'm going to change this so it emails to me and not to Nick here. And it didn't find the phone number for whatever reason. So if we wanted to, we could put it in there. You can expand this a little bit and see. It's kind of a weird number. So, you know, there's some, obviously there's some, the AI Builder standard model works very, very well, but it does struggle sometimes with certain things. That there's weird, if the text is a weird way or something like that, it might not find certain stuff. Maybe the business card doesn't have everything exactly it was looking for. Without a label, it can't sometimes tell where things are going. You can see this particular phone number is weird. It's got text in it, plus it's got, like that enumerated out to numbers afterwards. So it's, it's struggle finding that. But that's the nice part about our app here is we've given ourselves the ability to edit this as well if we wanted to. So what we're going to do is we've got our record here now. We're going to hit save and schedule app and hope that gets sent. So we've got our little dots coming up here saying it's working. Perfect. All right, so that got sent. Now we're going to go look at the table. So back to Dataverse tables, and we'll just confirm that it made it there. And we'll confirm that our needs to send email flag was checked as yes. All right, here's our first record. Email. Perfect. So this came, it set our email needed as yes, and it changed the email, so it brought the email sent in as no, which is what we were looking for, the default of no. So this is exactly what we're looking for. If we wanted to link it to a company that already exists in Dynamics 365 for sales, we certainly could do that. It could be part of the app, but again, very bare bones and simple here. I'm going to scan another one. So I'm going to take my phone and see what this looks like. You guys, I don't know if you can see this or not. But I'm going to scan this on my phone. I'm going to scan my own business card. So we'll do a take photo. Verify everything's okay. Save and schedule the email. I'm just going to refresh this. And there's my next record. So you can see it's really pretty quick. It's sending it in real time as you save the record. So that's kind of nice too. Great. So now that we have our app built, we have our data coming in. We have our custom fields on here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to build our Power Automate. So the Power Automate is pretty straightforward again. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a scheduled Cloudflow. And a scheduled Cloudflow is going to run on a recurrence pattern. So we're going to tell it when we want it to run, how frequently, and Power Automate will handle sort of that scheduling and running on the time that we tell it to. So again, we're going to say P4 webinar 2. We're going to say we want this to run once a day at 10 p.m. And we're going to hit create. Now we could have easily just as easily created an automated flow and come in here and put our own trigger in. Basically, all that does is it saves the name for us and it fills out this trigger already. You can see the trigger that we're using in this case is a recurrence. And it fills in the, we specify that we want it to run at this time, which is GMT. So this is 10 p.m. GMT once a day. I'm sorry, this is 4 a.m. GMT. It's 10 p.m. Central, and it runs every day. We could have done that on our own if we wanted to, but using the scheduled Cloudflow is going to put this recurrence in for us. If we wanted to run a, let's say you wanted a more real time. So after you hit save, it then puts it in CRM and sends out, or puts it in Dataverse and sends out that email right away. You could do that as well. Using a different trigger. There is a trigger for Dataverse that says when a new row is added. So we could use that to say, hey, when a new row is added to the contacts field, if it's got these fields on it or whatever, then go ahead and send out the email. But in this case, we're just going to run it once a night and go through all of them in bulk. So, again, various flavors of the same type of application here. Lots of flexibility inside Power Automate and Dataverse. So the first step that we're going to do is after the recurrence runs, is we're going to tell it to look in Dataverse and find a list of records that fit our criteria. So we'll hit new step. We're going to find our Dataverse connector. Now, again, this is, we use Dataverse, and someone yesterday asked, why are we using Power Automate, not Zapier? And I think, Zapier, you could do kind of the same thing. The idea with Dataverse is, the benefit of using Power Apps, obviously, is you get to build the application very easily. Building that whole user experience and putting a phone app is something that you couldn't do just natively in Zapier. So the Power App story, I think, is very compelling. Why use Power Automate instead of Zapier? Well, I think that Power Automate, I mean, if you're in this ecosystem already of using Microsoft stuff, you might as well use the other tools that are in here too. Power Automate itself doesn't really have any extra costs associated with this stuff. The fact that you're using Dataverse and you already have that license available is going to allow you to use it in Power Automate too. So, I mean, it's obviously to each of their own. I like to use Power Automate and the other Power Platform applications just to stay in the same ecosystem. But if you're much more familiar with Zapier, you're using it, you could also use that, I guess, to replace this. Benefit of Power Automate, though, is it does have all the standard Dataverse connectors. And again, there are first-party connectors here, so you're not going to have some sort of issue with versioning or most recent changes are going to make it here first and that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick Dataverse as our action. We're going to say list rows, and we're going to choose a table name. So we're going to go look for contacts. Now, in the advanced options, I mean, if we just run this, what's going to happen is once a day, we're going to get a list of all of the contacts inside Dataverse, which is wonderful, but not what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to filter this list by clicking Show Advanced Options, and we're going to add in a filter criteria. You can see here it tells you enter an OData style filter expression to limit which rows are listed. So if you're not familiar with using OData filtering, there's another good article in Docs, Microsoft's website, that gives you the ability to see all of the different syntax of all the expressions and stuff and the operations or operators rather that you can use when you're filtering OData. One of the very important parts to understand here is it's very syntax specific and it also is case specific. So when we're referring to our fields, we're going to have to go find the system field names, so we're going to have to make sure we get the cases right. So to do that, like we looked at before, we were back in the contacts table. You can open up the schema, click on columns, and in here is the name that we need to use when we're referring to it in this OData filter. So we're going to look for emails. And these are the two fields we need. So we're going to look for things that are email needed equals true and email sent is false, right? So that's going to return the stuff that's been created by our little business card reader application because it's going to have this defaulted to yes, and it hasn't been sent yet because we haven't marked it as sent. So we want that list of records to iterate through and send emails for. So we need this CR6E7, which is the prefix underscore email needed with a capital E. CR6E7 underscore email needed equals, and again, this is the operator for equals in the OData filter. And since we're referring to a Boolean, we're just going to type in true. And CR6E7 email sent equals false. Just want to come and confirm because I screwed this up yesterday. CR6E7 email needed, CR6E7 email sent. Okay, looks good to me. I mean, if you want to order it by like when it was created or whatever, you could certainly do that too. There's a lot of different options in here for how these records are going to get returned. But suffice to say, what's going to happen is we're going to get a subset of all the records inside the contacts table here that fit this criteria. So the next step then is we want to send an email. So we're going to hit new step. We're going to type in email, and we're going to use Exchange here. So I'm going to say send an email out of Office 365 Outlook. Click on that. We're going to specify the address. Who do we send it to? By clicking on to, and then hitting the Add Dynamic Content button, which allows us to pick the outputs from the previous steps. And we're going to choose the email from list rows, right? So this is the records that are returned. We're going to grab the email from there. Now, we're going to get multiple records here. So when I hit email, what happens is Power Automate sees that and knows to say, hey, you're going to get multiple records. So we're going to do an apply to each or sort of a for next loop inside here. And then we're going to put your step inside. So it's saying basically for each value here or each record that gets returned, do this step. So the first thing we're going to do is send an email out. So we're going to say, thank you for meeting with us. Hi, It was wonderful to see you at the conference. You have any questions? Please don't hesitate to follow up. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to send for each of the records that gets returned here. We're going to take the email address out of it, send this message to them. And then the next step we want to do to make sure that next time this runs, we skip the ones that already have emails, is we're going to add an action. We're going to find Dataverse again. And we're going to do update a row instead. So this time we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to pick the contacts table. There's a GUID that refers to the row, and it's just called contacts. We're going to click on this, and again, we're going to find the contact from our list rows output here. Contact, unique identifier of the contact, that's the one we want. And this just kind of pulls like the primary fields out, but we're going to go look for an advanced option here and grab our custom field that we created. So I'll just click on show advanced options. And we're going to go find our email sent and change this to yes. So again, after we send our email, we're going to then update the record and say that the email sent. It's kind of finicky sometimes, so you got to give it time for it to figure out what it's doing with all these different fields. So email sent to yes. Come on. All right. So now that's going to just update that particular value. It leaves all the rest of these unchanged. And we're going to save it. All right, so again, what's going to happen here is on a periodic basis, once a day, this is going to run through our emails. I'm sorry, our contacts in our Dataverse environment, and it's going to send an email out. Now, if we weren't using Dataverse, let's say we had, let's say we wanted to, instead of on our Power App, create a new record. Maybe we wanted to flag a record in Salesforce or something like that, or again, SharePoint lists or any kind of other database, a SQL database. You could certainly do that too, which again is one of the powers of Power Apps and Power Automate, is that they're not Microsoft specific. They're sort of technology company agnostic, let's say. And so if you wanted to use CRM, if you're already using Salesforce, more power to you. You can use those applications as well. And just basically the actions would be different, right? You'd be putting them in different places, whether a web API call or using a Salesforce connector, either of those things would work here. But in our case, what we're going to do again is we're going to go through our schedule. We're going to select our possibly multiple rows from Dataverse that fit that criteria. For each of those rows that gets returned, we're going to send an email, and then we're going to update that field to email sent. All right, saved. We're going to test this. I just want to come again and look at my contact table here. So we got that ready. All right, and then the next thing we want to do sorry, I think my audio cut out. See if I can get that fixed. I think that's, I think it's better. Okay. Had a bit of a technical issue there. So we've got our records created. We've got email needed checked. We've got email sent no. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test this. We're going to manually run it. Test. Run flow. Done. Failed for some reason. Let's see what happened here. It's always something. Yesterday I had problems running these and I had to fix them, and today I guess we're going to have new ones to look at. So let's see what the issue is here. Couldn't I find, oh, I did it again. Typo. Well, I guess that's a good example of the issue I ran into. So you can see here, couldn't I find a property? And obviously this little exclamation point is indicating that it's in here. So it's in our list rows. Bad request, and the error message is could not find a property. So I had a typo. This is supposed to be CR67 underscore email needed. So what I'm going to do is hit edit here. I'm going to come in and fix that. I don't think anyone's paying attention. You should have let me know in the chat that I made an error here. CR6E7 email needed equals true, and CR6E7 email sent equals false. Okay, let's try this again. Saving. Saved. Test. Manually. Test. Run flow. Done. Not for crying out loud. I'm going to have to go look at it again. CR6E7. CR6E7 underscore email needed. What in the world? Okay, let's look at this again. Contacts. Okay, so it's in the right environment. sa.global demos. sa.global demos. Okay, so next step we're going to do is we're going to look at the flow that ran and see the records that were returned. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to remove that filter first. Let me turn this off. Okay, so we're going to run this. Test it again. Now this should return all the records, obviously, because we removed the filter. Thank you. Test. Run flow. Done. All right, so let's look at the records that were returned. Look at this. So the field is actually underscore email sent with no caps. That's a nice trick. Let's see if we can find the other one, CR67. Oh, it worked. CR67, email sent. Yeah, underscore, what in the world? Okay, I guess there's no caps in the email, so let's fix that. two things we have to do. So now we updated this flag already on these records. So we're going to come back here and change this. Email sent, no. And we're going to go back to our flow. We're going to put our filter rows back in. And I'm going to get rid of the caps. And we're going to hit save again. Sorry, guys, I just did this yesterday and did not have, I come up with new problems every time I do this. Okay, so test. Manually, let's check to make sure that these saved. Yep, they're fine. Okay. Okay, good sign. So this ran and it found here's the toast, obviously, with notification. So we did get the email. You could obviously make this look a little bit better than this too. I used something like this previously and threw in a like a Calendly link for someone to follow up with me. So you can make this quite a bit more complex. You have the ability to use HTML emails too. So if you want to add logos or flashing lights or whatever you want it to do in here, you can certainly do that too. So it did return those two records. You ran through it. And if you look here in the apply to each, you'll actually see that it returned two records. So it has this little widget for when there's more than one record, you can actually scroll through each of them. So this is the first one that went to my sa.global.com email address. And if I hit next, it's going to go to my old business card too. And so you can see, you could just scroll back and forth between the records and see if there's issues or whatever. You can troubleshoot them this way. What you saw also me do was use the outputs, right? So this UI experience tries to kind of make things a little easier to read. But what that does sometimes is it does obfuscate some of the details, obviously. So this returned the status region here, but it didn't give me any additional details about the record, right? So when I wanted to see what the actual field that's getting returned is, I can click the show raw outputs, and it's going to show me the JSON that comes back with all the data in here, right? And that's where I was able to see that this is how I need to refer to this field instead of the way that the UI in the Power Apps portal showed me. So just some troubleshooting, and again, this is the kind of stuff that as you do this, you get used to, but it is quite, it's very user friendly. They try to make it as visible and transparent as possible where the stuff's coming from and give you the ability to troubleshoot these things too. You can see like this is a integer and this is a string and these are booleans because there's no quotes around them. So there's just little things that you'll see and understand with when you're dealing with these OData filters that do kind of come into play a bit here. So, all right, so that got done. Let's check these records again. I'm going to just come back, refresh this. All right, so the email sent got sent again, which is great. Now the last piece of the test here obviously is to run this again and make sure that I don't get another set of emails, right? Because that's what we want to do is we want to only run it for the ones where the email has not been sent yet. So I'm going to run this one more time. Run flow, done. It's running. It ran. Let's click on it to look at the details here. And it's successful. It just successfully didn't return any records, right? So this was successful. It didn't throw an error. And this, you can see they're grayed out. That means there was nothing found in here and it didn't actually find any records to go through. So we'll show raw outputs. We'll see just an empty envelope here instead, and nothing in the value. So this worked successfully and did what we wanted it to. Does anyone have any questions? No questions. Is it really quiet or not here anymore? One or the other. Well, so next steps we talked about last time is you can sign up for the Power Platform Developer Plan. And again, this is going to give you the ability to, This is going to give you the ability to get access to these premium connectors like AI Builder and Power Apps and the Dataverse connector and so on. without having to actually buy the licensing. So it's something that's great that you should sign up for, give you the ability to kind of test drive some of this stuff, and use some of this more advanced and complex business logic that we didn't use last time. And then secondarily, we do have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to send out an invite sometime soon, and we're going to be talking about ALM and sort of how to create a center of excellence for Power Platform. So now that we've put all of these tools in your hands, how are we going to make sure that they don't run amok and cause trouble across the organization, right? Rein that back in. And that'll be something we'll talk about in a couple of weeks.